My sister grabbed my daughter by the hair and called her trash. Now I'm marrying the lawyer who took her children's future away. The smell of burnt sugar and overbrewed iced tea always reminds me of the day my life split into two distinct parts, the before and the after. It was the 4th of July, a day that was supposed to be a symphony of childish laughter, sizzling barbecue, and the distant pop of early fireworks. Instead, it became the day my sister, Clara, grabbed my 9-year-old daughter, Lily, by her sun-streaked hair and called her trash. The word, sharp and ugly, sliced through the humid summer air and seemed to hang there, a permanent stain on the cheerful backdrop of red, white, and blue decorations. It all started, as most of our family tragedies did, with something small and insignificant. Lily had accidentally knocked over a pitcher of sweet tea that Clara had spent, in her words, the entire morning perfecting. It was a sticky, sugary flood across the pristine white deck, a minor inconvenience in the grand scheme of a family gathering. But to Clara, it was a personal affront, a deliberate act of sabotage orchestrated by my daughter. I saw the switch flip behind her eyes. It was a look I knew well, a tightening of the jaw and a narrowing of her gaze that signaled an impending storm. I rushed forward, apologizing, grabbing paper towels, promising to make another batch immediately. But Clara wasn't looking at me. Her focus was entirely on Lily, who stood frozen, her small hands clasped in front of her, her face a mask of fear and confusion. "You are just like your mother," Clara hissed, her voice low and venomous. "Careless. Thoughtless. Nothing but a piece of trash." And then she did it. She lunged, her perfectly manicured fingers twisting into Lily's long, blonde hair, and she yanked. Lily let out a cry that was more shock than pain, a sound that ripped through my soul and ignited a fury I hadn't felt in years. I reacted on pure instinct, shoving Clara away from my child with a force that surprised even me. She stumbled back, tripping over a lawn chair and landing in an ungraceful heap on the grass. Her husband, Mark, rushed to her side, glaring at me as if I were the aggressor. My own husband, Tom, was instantly by my side, his arm a protective barrier around Lily, who was now sobbing quietly into his shirt. The party was over. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken resentments and years of festering bitterness. That was the before. The after began the next morning, with the reflection of a bruised and hollowed-out woman staring back at me from the bathroom mirror. The woman was me, but I didn't recognize her. The fire of the previous day had cooled into a cold, hard resolve. This wasn't just about a spilled pitcher of tea or a moment of anger. It was a pattern, a relentless campaign of cruelty that Clara had waged against me, and now my daughter, for as long as I could remember. It was the constant belittling comments disguised as jokes, the backhanded compliments, the way she would rewrite our shared childhood memories to cast herself as the martyr and me as the villain. I had always tolerated it, for the sake of keeping the peace, for the sake of our parents who pleaded with us to get along. But when she laid her hands on my child, she had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. I knew I had to do something more than just cutting her out of my life. I needed to send a message, to create a fortress around my daughter that Clara could never penetrate. That's when I decided to call a lawyer. I didn't want her money, not really. I wanted a restraining order. I wanted a legally binding document that would state, in no uncertain terms, that she was a danger to my child. I found David Sterling through a friend of a friend. His name was spoken in hushed, reverent tones. He was described as a shark, a legal pit bull, the man you hired when you absolutely, positively had to win. His office was the antithesis of the chaotic, emotionally charged world I was living in. It was a realm of cool glass, polished mahogany, and quiet, ruthless efficiency. David himself was intimidating. He was tall and impeccably dressed, with sharp blue eyes that seemed to see right through the carefully constructed composure I was trying to maintain. He listened to my story without interruption, his face a neutral mask. I stumbled through the account of the 4th of July, my voice cracking as I described the look on Lily's face. I told him about the years of smaller cuts, the psychological warfare that had eroded my self-esteem. When I was finished, I sat there, emotionally drained, expecting a few words of sympathy and a discussion about the restraining order. Instead, he leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Tell me about your parents' estate," he said. The question was so out of left field that I was momentarily speechless. I told him our parents had passed away 5 years prior, leaving behind a modest inheritance. They had owned a small portfolio of rental properties, which were to be managed jointly by Clara and me, with the profits split evenly between us and our children, held in trust until they turned 25. I had always left the management to Clara. She was the business-minded one, the one who was good with numbers. I received a check every quarter, and I never thought to question the amount. I trusted her. She was my sister. David's expression didn't change, but I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, a hunter catching a scent. He asked for the trust documents, the quarterly statements, the contact information for the property management company. I left his office feeling bewildered, a strange mix of hope and dread churning in my stomach. I had gone in seeking protection and had walked out feeling like I had just armed a missile. The next few weeks were a blur of emails and phone calls. David and his team descended upon the financial records of the estate with a terrifying thoroughness. They were forensic accountants of the soul, digging through years of transactions, cross-referencing bank statements, and interviewing tenants. I tried to focus on Lily, on getting her into therapy, on rebuilding the sense of safety that my sister had shattered. But in the back of my mind, the legal machinery was grinding away, and I was both terrified and fascinated by what it might uncover. The revelation came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was in David's conference room, a cup of coffee growing cold in my hands. He laid out a series of spreadsheets and highlighted documents on the large mahogany table. The numbers told a story far uglier than a simple assault. Clara and her husband, Mark, hadn't just been managing the properties, they had been systematically bleeding them dry. They had been using the rental income as their personal slush fund, financing a lifestyle of luxury cars, designer clothes, and exotic vacations. They had taken out second mortgages on the properties, forging my signature on the loan documents. The quarterly checks I received were a pittance, just enough to keep me from getting suspicious, while they were siphoning off tens of thousands of dollars a year. The most sickening part was the trust. The money that was supposed to be for our children, for Lily, for her own 2 sons, was gone. They had drained it to fund their lavish life, leaving behind an empty shell of an account. I stared at the evidence, a cold, creeping numbness spreading through my veins. The woman who had called my daughter trash was a thief. She had not only assaulted my child but had also stolen her future, and the future of her own children, without a flicker of remorse. The restraining order was no longer enough. This was not just about a moment of violence, it was about a decade of deceit. David explained the legal options. We could sue for damages, for the stolen money, for the fraudulent loans. It would be a brutal, public fight. Clara would be exposed. Her life, as she knew it, would be over. It will destroy her, I whispered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. It will take away her children's future. David's gaze was steady, unwavering. She took that away when she decided to steal from them, he said, his voice devoid of pity. She built their future on a foundation of lies. All we are doing is bringing the truth to light. In that moment, something shifted between us. He wasn't just a lawyer anymore. He was the only person who understood the full scope of the betrayal. He saw the invisible wounds, the years of manipulation that had led to this point. He saw me, not as a victim, but as a woman who had finally found her strength. The lawsuit was filed, and the fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Clara's world imploded. The news of the fraud spread through our community like wildfire. Her friends abandoned her. Mark, her husband, who had been a willing participant in the scheme, suddenly claimed he had known nothing about it, painting her as a desperate, unstable woman. He filed for divorce, seeking sole custody of their children to protect them from their criminal mother. The court case was a formality. The evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable. David was magnificent. He was a master puppeteer in the courtroom, calm, precise, and utterly relentless. He dismantled Clara's defense with surgical precision, exposing every lie, every deception. He didn't raise his voice or resort to theatrics. He simply presented the facts, and the facts were damning. The judge awarded me everything we had asked for. The stolen money was to be repaid, with interest. The properties were to be sold, the fraudulent loan settled, and the remaining assets placed in a new, ironclad trust managed by a neutral third party. Clara was left with nothing but a mountain of debt and a tarnished reputation. Her children's future, the one she had so carelessly gambled away, was gone. There was no victory in that courtroom, only a profound and hollow sadness. I had won, but I had lost my sister. I had protected my daughter, but I had destroyed a family. I expected to feel a sense of relief, of vindication. Instead, I felt empty. The weeks after the trial were quiet. The storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape of wreckage. I spent my days with Lily, trying to piece our lives back together. We went to the park, we baked cookies, we read books. But the shadow of what had happened lingered. One evening, David called. He said he was checking in, seeing how I was doing. It was a professional courtesy, but his voice was warm, tinged with a genuine concern that went beyond a lawyer-client relationship. We talked for over an hour, about everything and nothing. We talked about Lily, about his own love for sailing, about the best pizza place in the city. It was the first time I had had a normal, easy conversation with anyone in months. We started talking more frequently. He would call me on his way home from work, and I would find myself looking forward to the sound of his voice. He was intelligent and witty, with a dry sense of humor that made me laugh, a sound I thought I had forgotten how to make. He never talked about the case unless I brought it up. He seemed to understand that I needed to heal, to move on from the trauma of the past. He was patient and kind, and in his presence, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in a very long time. Our first date was a walk in the park. It was awkward at first, the transition from lawyer and client to something more. But as we walked, the formality melted away. He told me about his childhood, about his own complicated family. He had a younger brother who had struggled with addiction, and he had spent years trying to save him, only to realize that he couldn't. He understood the pain of loving someone who was self-destructive, the helpless rage of watching them throw their life away. He understood me. I found myself falling for him, slowly at first, and then all at once. It was a love that was born not in the sunshine of a perfect romance, but in the shared darkness of a difficult time. He had seen me at my most broken, my most vulnerable, and he had not flinched. He had stood by my side, a steady and unwavering presence in the storm. He had not saved me, but he had given me the strength to save myself. When he proposed, 6 months later, it was on a sailboat, with the sun setting over the water, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. It was a world away from the sterile conference room where we had first met. He didn't have a fancy speech. He just looked at me, his blue eyes soft with an emotion I now knew was love, and said, "I want to build a future with you, Sarah. A real one. One built on truth and trust." I said yes, without a moment's hesitation. I knew there would be whispers. I knew people would talk. They would say I was marrying the man who had destroyed my sister. They would paint me as a vindictive woman who had taken her revenge and then stolen the executioner. They would not understand the nuances, the years of pain that had led to that breaking point. They would not see the man who had held my hand through the darkest days of my life, the man who had shown me what it meant to be truly seen and valued. They would not understand that David hadn't taken away my sister's children's future. He had simply reclaimed the one she had stolen from mine. My relationship with Clara is non-existent. I hear about her sometimes, through the grapevine of family gossip. She works a menial job, lives in a small apartment, and has supervised visits with her sons. They say she is a shadow of her former self, bitter and broken. I feel a pang of sadness for her, for the sister she could have been, for the family we could have had. But I do not feel guilt. Guilt is a useless emotion. It cannot undo the past. It cannot heal the wounds. All it can do is hold you hostage. I am no longer a hostage. I am building a new life, a new family, one that is founded on honesty and respect. Lily is thriving. She is happy and confident, the shadow of that terrible day finally receding. She adores David, and he adores her. He is teaching her how to sail, and her laughter as the wind catches the sails is the sweetest sound in the world. I am marrying the lawyer who took my sister's children's future away. But the truth is, he gave me and my daughter ours back. And for that, I will be forever grateful. The after is so much better than the before.